let's face it, who doesn't love a story? I mean, stories are fun. We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. Down through the ages, storytelling has been a wonderful way to teach, to make us laugh, to give us wisdom, to guide us in our faith. And so, in the spirit of telling stories, I invite you to join me to reflect upon the story that we just heard, to look at it and see, where am I in that story? It's a story about healing, and therefore I ask you to think about, just ponder, where are the places in your own emotional or spiritual life where you too long for some kind of healing. Perhaps it's a rift in relationship or a deep wound from years ago. It might be an act or thought that you deplore and yearn for the cleansing of forgiveness. It could be a restlessness and a hungry spirit that aches for a meaningful life in the holy presence. Just let that kind of wiggle around in a pocket in your mind while we look again at this delightful ancient story. In ancient Syria, there was a great man, Naaman, who was high in favor with his boss, the king of Aram. He was powerful, influential, and a highly successful commander of the king's army. But Naaman had a problem. He had leprosy. Now, let's pause a minute here and look at what that might mean. In biblical accounts, it's very likely that leprosy did not refer to that horrific disease we sometimes call Hansen's disease. That form of leprosy is that terrible malady which, untreated, will just eat away the flesh and bones of the victim. But the ancient historian Josephus tells us that the biblical disease was likely more a form of psoriasis. It was not contagious nor life-threatening. Uncomfortable? Yes. Embarrassingly unsightly, perhaps? Yes. But would it kill you? No, not likely. Nevertheless, clearly, Naaman wanted to be healed. Knowing this, the Israelite slave girl who served Naaman's wife told her about a prophet in her country who could heal him. Pause again. Note that source of information. Count it. Nameless. We don't know her name. She's powerless, being enslaved. Foreign, young, and female. It's just possible that the answers we seek to our deepest needs might also come to us in the most unlikely and unexpected way. Quickly, Naaman's wife shared this amazing news with her husband. He, in turn, told the king. Now listen carefully to what happens next. The king told Naaman, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." Wait. Letter to the king? Didn't they just totally disregard what the girl said? But they decided to approach the king of Israel because that's what was comfortable. Isn't it interesting how we human beings often choose to just kind of tweak information so we don't have to stray too far from the familiarity of our comfort zone? So the powerful commander got ready for the important trip. He went prepared to pay. He took 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. Suffice it to say, it was a lot. Perhaps Naaman thought he could buy healing with his wealth and power. And then, like most of us, he perhaps had no desire to feel beholden. Isn't it so very hard for us to overcome that sense that healing grace has to be earned or paid for? When Naaman arrived in Samaria, he went directly to the king of Israel and presented his letter. The king was astounded when he read, "I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of leprosy." Whoa! The king knew he couldn't heal this Syrian man, for the king of Israel. Must stop gesturing. Technical difficulties. Be back in a moment. There we go. The king was just absolutely astounded. And so it was just one of those times. We've all had them when we've heard something and it just twisted our stomach into an icy knot. He tore his clothes and he shouted, "Am I God? Do I have the power to give death or life, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy?" He was pretty sure this was going to be his undoing. But the prophet Elijah heard of the events and sent word to direct the Syrian commander to him. Wait a minute. Wasn't that what the slave girl said in the first place? Why? Why did they choose to disregard the information and go to that royal power? But why is it that we choose to skirt around the direct, simple ways to the heart of God's grace and love? Well, imagine the relief for both the king and the commander. So the king sent him to the prophet. Now, remember, Naaman was someone, and he knew it. When you're someone, you might assume there's a proper way to present yourself and a proper way to be greeted. So the important and mighty commander came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. He had arrived and waited to be appropriately received. Unbelievably, the prophet neither came out nor invited this noble gentleman in. Instead, he sends out a messenger who simply tells him, "Go wash in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be healed," and turns around and goes back in the house. Likely, Naaman stood with his mouth agape for several seconds before an explosion of indignant anger spewed forth. He had expected something very different, perhaps a private, stately, respectful healing. With even greater fanfare, he spun his entourage around, pausing just long enough to blurt out, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Besides, aren't the rivers in my land better than these meager waters of Israel?" He turned and left in a rage. But how tempting it is for us to create those preconceived pictures of how God will act in our life, setting ourselves up for bitter disappointment when God doesn't follow the script we've created on God's behalf. Once again, a nameless, insignificant servant approaches the commander, asking a profoundly important question. Father, he said, if the prophet commanded you to do something difficult, would you have not done it? How much more when all he said was wash and be clean? And there it is, the heart of this delightful story. Why make it difficult when, in fact, the answer is profoundly simple? And so at last, Naaman understood. He went down, immersed himself 7 times in the river Jordan, and he was healed. When we have dismissed the simple gift of grace, of forgiveness, and of healing, we lose out on an amazingly precious gift that God offers us. What do we, you and I, really need to heal the brokenness in our lives? Like Naaman, we can choose to let go of our preconceived notions, release our claim to power or entitlement, and perceive God at work in those broken places of each of our lives. And when we do, then everything changes. We recognize that we are loved not because we've earned the right to be loved, but because God is love. When we perceive that we are forgiven and accepted, not because we've paid our debt or merited it, but because God is forgiveness and mercy. Yep, it's that simple. Amen. Let us join together in the song, "To Be Your Presence."